Hello, Dr. Naraniki from the Millis Institute at Christian Heritage College. In this video, the second part of a summary of a lecture given at the Millis Institute on Camus. I'd like to talk a bit about Camus' personal biography and the way that influences his work. First thing to keep in mind that he was a French colonial in North Africa. So we see automatically he's in a minority situation. He's in an unusual situation. He didn't have an easy life. He had a difficult life. His difficult childhood. His dad was killed in the First World War. He didn't know his dad. He lived with his grandmother primarily. Well, his mother was pretty much working all the time, doing sort of domestic labor, that kind of thing. His mother was from a kind of Spanish stock, so the language they spoke at home wasn't standard high French. So we see him existing in a kind of colonial world where he wasn't part of the French world complete. He had access to the high French culture through the French education system in North Africa, but it wasn't his domestic culture. He had to move up into that culture from a very working class culture. He wasn't part of the culture of the surrounding Arab population. We notice in his works he often doesn't name Arab characters, he just refers to them as the Arab. So there's an estrangement from the local inhabitants as well. So it was part of the diasporic sort of condition there. During the Second World War, he did the opposite to many people in that he moved to Paris just as everyone was trying to leave Paris due to German Nazi occupation. He fought as part of the resistance. He carried a gun, he had fake IDs, that kind of thing. And so it was a very eventful life. He couldn't return to Algiers when he wanted to, given the War of Independence that was going on. So he was effectively left in Europe. So he regarded himself as French. He was culturally part of the French world. Moving up from a working class person to creating his own theatre company, it really shows his personal level of energy and competence. So he had that. So he was a very sort of, was a highly sophisticated, competent person, able to interact and move in a very cosmopolitan context. He spent time in Bohemia and Prague, and you notice it. He refers to Prague as being that sort of a dark, as Bohemia being a very dark sort of place, and just longing for the light of North Africa. So even though he wasn't culturally at home with the Arabs in North Africa, and perhaps on the outside also with a lot of the French. Early on he was a socialist, a communist. Early on, partly as a result of his sense of being part of a working class and the difficulties that the working class have faced. He later went on to oppose communism, and this caused a sort of a break with one of his friends, the great French philosopher Sartre, who continued to justify communism and Stalinism with more and more sophisticated sort of dialectical turns. And he lived out his life in Europe. Later he settled in southern France, and he settled there because it reminded him of North Africa. So we see a lot of complexities and a lot of complexes in this personal character. We see he was someone that was 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 living in a diasporic condition twice over. He was an exile twice over. First of all, being French in North Africa, and then kind of being in continental Europe with its completely different atmospheric feel, but still being in the sense African, still being at home in the African landscape and cityscape, idealizing the atmosphere in Africa, even if that means kind of overlooking a lot of the negative realities of life in Algiers, but the way he kind of remembers it and the way he writes about it reveals that real typical sort of diasporic sort of idealization, that longing, that nostalgia. So I think nostalgia is also a crucial term to keep in mind. So the sense of being on the move, always kind of a guest of others, reliant upon the hospitality of others as he moved, as he sort of adapted to a new home and new situations in Europe. I think that kind of having a foot in both worlds, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So there was that personal complexity of his actual situation, which led to some of these themes being so predominant in his work. Themes of hospitality, exile, alienation, sort of isolation, all these themes that are very typical of an individual who is not at home in any particular place in a sort of a simple, straightforward way. Where he is at home in Algiers, it's at home in the place, but not really at home in the society. We get a sense that he was never really at home with the with the French establishment there. Nor was he at home with the Arab population, but he was at home in the cityscape, at home in the climate. Whereas in Europe we get a sense that that culturally he was perhaps more at home in post-war Paris, that kind of thing. In the intellectual climate there, but however, there was still a longing for Africa that constantly comes out in his works, and the location of his the location that the narratives, that constant sort of returning to his homeland via his works. I mean, I think that kind of might resonate with a lot of people today, given the situation with COVID and the fact that people are stranded and can't move between different locations. They're often stranded someplace they don't want to be, and the way that art and culture enables that movement, that travelling. So where the physical body may not be able to travel, the mind is able to move back to its home, in a sense, and his works do create recreate. You get a sense of that something that he was longing for, something that he was missing in Europe by reading his works. Yeah. So I think that sort of personal situation, uh, uh, his personal, well, his works in a sense are kind of autobiographical in that way. They have strange autobiographical elements that are recurrent in little themes. Uh, that a little bit of a background to his own life helped to sort of uh, make a bit more clear why his works often set in that North African context. Okay.